What's up, gang? Welcome to The Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mershazday. I'm so pumped to have you here with me. Now listen, The Greatness Machine, we're about two things. Number one, people who are living their passions. And number two, those who are creating greatness in the world and doing both of these things despite the odds against them. Each episode, we're going to feature interviews with game changers, business leaders, telling us their origin stories, what made them tick, what got them to where they are now. Why? So it can help you step into your greatness within your life, your business, and your career. Occasionally, you might hear a few solo episodes from myself, moi, as I leverage my 20 years of entrepreneurship as a CEO and founder to help you grow and level up in your journey to scale your life and your business. So come be a fly on the wall, enjoy the conversation, and I'm stoked to have you here with me. Guys, welcome to today's episode of The Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mershazday, and boy, we have a special guest. David Galbenski is in the house. What's up, brother?
Hey, man. It's so good to see you, Darius. What's up, baby?
Oh, man, this is going to be... I drank coffee this morning, and then I was like, why am I drinking coffee? I'm hanging out with David Galbenski. This is going to be hype.
Dude, we're bringing the energy today, brother.
Oh, man. So, guys, David Galbenski, the man, the myth, the legend. All right, I'm going to tell him some inside baseball on that he doesn't know about our relationship. So, David Galbenski and I, we go way back, but I knew of him probably before he knew of me. He was the global chairperson of Entrepreneurs Organization. What year was that, by the way?
Yeah, 2008 and 9, man. Hard to believe it's been a long time ago.
All right. So we're talking like 14, 15 years ago that he was the global chairman. And I knew who he was when he was global chairman because I was in EO then. I was actually on the board of EO San Francisco in 08, 09.
Yeah.
So, of course, you're going to know who the chairperson of the entire organization is if you're on the board. So I knew of him. He didn't know me then because I was just like hiding in San Francisco. Fast forward to like 2022? Was that your first year back to GOT?
It was. Great memory, baby.
So I only know that because I was the chairperson of GOT that year. But so I can remember my years when I was working. So yeah, man, I knew of you 13 years before we actually met. So I saw now take that a step aside. So when you know of someone, you're kind of like watching what's happening in their life. And David had a bunch of crazy shit go down in his life. And because I was involved in EO, I just kind of like heard about it. So I didn't know you, never met you, but I'm kind of watching your like life path open up. And as we're going to talk about on the show, those next probably few years got pretty crazy.
Absolutely.
And so I was like fully up to speed on who this man was before he knew who I was. Now, fast forward to 2022, right when we met at GOT, I felt like I already knew you, dude.
Yeah.
I was like, now the cool thing about that is like, dude, you're like heart forward, kindred spirit type of human, as am I. And so we just hit it off like bang, man. Like I was like, we're like peas and carrots. So, man, I'm so pumped to finally have you here on The Greatness Machine, my friend. It's been a long time coming, and it's good to get to hang out.
Oh, man, it always is. And I remember that moment, man, just that energy exchange, right, baby, that you have when you connect with someone that, you know is like the person that you should have met a long time ago. And you're like, yeah, we're finally connected one-on-one. And it just makes it awesome, baby. So I'm so glad to be on your show, man. You've had so many amazing guests. It's such a gift to the world that you're using your personality to share stories, right? Because we learn from people's journeys, right? And you just are great at asking questions, connecting the dots. And so I'm honored to be on, brother. Can't wait to hang out with you here for the next little bit.
Oh, man, appreciate it so much. I was going to say, hey, we're good. We can end the show. You just like pump me up. So now, so I'm going to do your formal bio and then we'll get started here. Do you mind if I just run through that really quickly here?
Let's do it.
All right, guys. So David Galbenski, the man, the myth, the legend, serial entrepreneur, former global chairman of EO. He was an E&Y Entrepreneur of the Year, sold his company. But we're here to talk about something like a little bit more personal and near to dear to him. But we also want to talk about some of the entrepreneurship stuff. Oh, by the way, also co-founder and chair of the Global School of Entrepreneurship. And we're going to be talking a lot today around his foundation, that he co-founded the Living Liver Foundation. So we're going to be talking about like how we all can create greatness in the world, help and save lives. But my man David here, man, I'd love, I know you didn't just like actually you probably did wake up like one day, like the day you're born, the fireball knows David Galbenski, just like all the greatness came to be. But I'm assuming it was a fireball that formed over time. So would you mind telling us, we love origin stories here at the Greatness Machine, would love if you give us some of the background. How'd you get to where you got to?
Yeah, you know what? I tell you, oftentimes origin stories go back to just growing up as a kid, right? That's oftentimes where it's at. My entrepreneurial spark was put together by my mom and dad. And they formed they bought a bar restaurant in a small rural town in the state of Michigan, man. And I just was inspired by what they would do, man. They'd get up in the morning, they created jobs, they created opportunities for other people. And that was my entrepreneurial spark, right? That ability to go, I want to follow that path. So kind of the origin story there was just, seeing parents work hard, take on risk, try to create some opportunities. And that to me was really what I like to call that entrepreneurial mindset, right? That power, possibilities that we can control our own destinies. Have a vision, go see what happens. So they were my inspiration to go down that entrepreneurial journey.
I love that, man. And so, so your folks, like, that's kind of my story too. So I have a question for you on that, because I think, most people, at least when I grew up and when I look back, it was not something I actually like was recognizing at the time, but like most of my friends' parents weren't entrepreneurs.
Right.
Like my dad owned gas stations.
Yeah.
And he so that was like his jam, and he ended up, doing real estate, and like, so I was just kind of grew up around some guy that was like, building his own stuff. He didn't necessarily love what he was doing.
Yeah.
But it was like, he said something to me once that I remember. He said, I'd rather make $25,000 a year working for myself than $250,000 a year working for somebody else. Right. And this is like back in the 90s. So that would have been, a lot of money back then, the 250K. And so I remember hearing him say that, and I was like, all right, like, I get it. And so do you think like watching your folks, kind of do their own thing, was that something where you're like, oh, like, that's a way to make a living? Or because obviously you ended up kind of going down a path that could have been much less entrepreneurial, much more corporate. Like, so give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and what's interesting, right? I'll give you a couple things. One fun story, right? Because you probably had it as well with your family. One thing I loved was going in on Sunday morning, right? And there's where my entrepreneurial spark would come out to the bar restaurant. It was back in the day when there literally still, Darius, was jukeboxes that you would put coins in, man. And I'd be like, Dad, there's one job I want. I want to sweep up around the jukebox. And he's like, why, son? Because I knew what would happen. People would miss putting coins in the jukebox.
I love that.
I was just like, hey, man, that's my entrepreneurial gig, Pop. If I can get whatever's around that machine, is that mine? He's like, you go get it, son. So it was one of those fun things that was the spark of like, hey, what do I want to do? And where's some extra money that I can put change in my pocket?
Oh, I love that, man. I love that.
And so we encourage that thinking, right? He's like, hey, man, I love how you're thinking, son. You go do that, That's amazing.
Did you have siblings, or was it just yourself?
I did. I have an older brother, Paul, who's 2.5 years older than I was. And, we just had fun. And the other unique thing about entrepreneurship, so they ran a bar restaurant, right? And we used to love when we'd go, there was a ball field out there, so they'd have softball tournaments. And we used to love hanging out, watching. And then here's the crazy thing we thought, Darius, is that food was free.
Hey, of course.
Hey, Pop, put on that burger, give me a little pizza, and then you realize as an entrepreneur later, you're like, oh, man, there was some cost of goods sold there, man. He's probably hey, son, no more, man.
No, you guys were eating him out of house and home. I love that. What, did you work at the bar and restaurant with your parents?
No. So what's interesting is they sold that prior to I was of age to, if you will, officially, work in that enterprise. And then my dad actually, after he had his little entrepreneurial gig, ended up, going to work. We're from Michigan. He ended up working in the automotive industry for the latter part of his career. So I got the entrepreneurial taste, saw that as I was growing up, and then he pivoted after that to working in the automotive industry.
Nice. So you ended up going into law. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So for me, I did my undergrad in business, and I was of the LA law generation. TV always, dictates like, oh, what would be cool to be? No lawyers in my family, but I was always thinking, man, I loved what they did on LA Law, man. These sharp dressed lawyers, living the high life, would go in, make a closing argument in 90 seconds, win a case. That's what lawyers must do. It's like, that's just what you do. So I ended up then going to law school after. And what's funny, Darius, is unfortunately Hollywood embellishes what the good part of being a lawyer. And what I soon found out within about 6 months of practicing law, that's not quite what a young lawyer does. A young lawyer's in there digging through documents on the computer, drafting stuff. And I'm like, whoa, I may be probably at best a C+ lawyer. I better go chase that entrepreneurial dream again.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's funny. I kind of had the same thought. When I was in 4th grade, I was 10, and they're like, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I'm like, "Oh, I want to be a lawyer because lawyers are rich."
Right.
And then as I got older, I was like, "Oh man, there's a lot." I ended up working at a law firm when so this is what. So I when I was 19, I guess I worked at a family law firm that my friend's parents owned in Sacramento, and I was filing paperwork. And I was like, no, man, this is fucking all paperwork.
Exactly.
Like nowadays, it's, there's some paper, it's all emails, it's all digital.
Right.
But dude, this was like, it was all paperwork. And I was like, oh, yuck. Like, this does not sound like fun. Now there's probably some parts of law. I now do private equity, and like that's actually kind of cool.
Yes. Yeah.
The drafting part is not still there's an art to the drafting of private equity, but that's probably on the more interesting side. But to your point, it's a ton of paperwork. It's a ton of like dotting your I's and crossing your T's, because if you don't, then you like basically lose the case. Right. Or you'll lose whatever it is you're trying to do, or you have to go do it again. So when you got into, like, tell us a little bit about the entrepreneurial story there. I'd love to kind of hear like how you pivoted.
Yeah. So funny, Darius. So I started having these epiphanies like, this isn't my unique ability. Boy, I'm probably not going to be great at this. I got to figure it out. And I'm like, I'm going back to this entrepreneurial enterprise. And so back in the day, still newspapers, physical newspapers. I probably should have been billing and doing work, but I picked up a copy of the Detroit Legal News, popped open to page 4 or 5, and saw this really cool article about 4 women that were doing what we would call court appearance coverage. If someone had a conflict, like, hey, I can't make this court appearance, maybe someone will take it on for me. And it was kind of like a staffing company, right? They're like, hey, I can't make it. Let me get someone that will. And I'm like, whoa, that's a pretty cool idea. I never thought about that. Like, man, we could find someone to do temporary work. And I'm like, well, that's an interesting opportunity. So literally walked 2 doors down to who became my co-founder in our enterprise, Mark Adams. He was a CPA, did corporate transactional stuff. I was a litigator. And I said, hey, Mark, man, I just read this article. I got this crazy idea. Why don't we put together a staffing company for legal professionals, billables, paralegals, clerks, lawyers? And I go, I got $1,000. That's all I got. I'm an early lawyer. Maybe we just started up. You got $1,000. Let's do it together. You know how to file all that paperwork to form our company. You in? He's like, I'm in, dude. Let's go do it. So literally we're working it now known as the side hustle, right? Then we didn't have that like
That's amazing.
terminology of let's do a side hustle. It was our side hustle, man. We walked into the managing partner's office, Wayne Inman, and said, "Hey, Wayne, we got this crazy idea. We'd love to launch this. We're not ready to leave the firm. Would you allow us?" We actually came clean on our side hustle. Would you allow us to launch this business? And I'll never forget it. Wayne, who wore reading glasses because of all the paperwork, took them off and he goes, "Sons, I really don't care what you do in your free time. As long as you're here billing, serving our clients, you do whatever you want." And then Mark and I realized he probably knew we weren't going to have a lot of free time because he was working us 60, 70 hours a week. And we're like, yeah, he's probably thinking, yeah, fancy idea. They're done. There's no way they're going to pursue this. You guys go chase it. 6 months, you'll just be cranking away, doing your law stuff. And so that was the genesis story of launching what became Lumen Legal, that we ran for 27 years, sold in 2020. And it was one of those fun journeys, right, where we kind of did something inside the industry, the legal services industry, that was very unique in the early 90s when people were not thinking about temporary attorneys, because they'd be like, temporary attorneys? What's the quality of an attorney? At that time. Fun startup, my mom and dad's basement, and then we just had some fun growing it over the years.
How long were you working with at your firm, and how long was it a side hustle before you're like, oh no, like this is not a side hustle anymore? How long did that take?
Yeah, so great question. So literally about 58 weeks. And I counted it in weeks, man, because we formed it, late December, and then worked a full calendar year. And I remember it was January 13th, 1995, baby, when I put in my resignation. And why I remember it so vividly, Darius, because it's the entrepreneurial journey, right? Leave a good paying job in law, had gotten some traction, but still wasn't drawing a salary, man, right? I wasn't pulling a salary out of our business, right? Left it. The only compensation I got in 1995 was my 2-week paycheck. From the law firm, because I just kept pouring the money back in,
So wait, so when you say not taking a paycheck, you meant like basically to get this thing off the ground, you had enough traction where you're like, hey, there's something here, like we just need to like go lean into it, and then it'll become something like legit that we can pay ourselves from.
100%. Just left it and said, we got something here. I'm going all in. And then we just, thinly capitalized. We started with $2,000, man.
Yeah.
Weren't bankable. So we had our own personal savings, and then just jumped in, and then obviously from there grew the business and started paying ourselves. But that 1995 startup, that was my only compensation, man.
How long did it take from the time you left in 95 until you were making at least what you were making working at the law firm? What was the time frame?
It took about 18 months, 24 months before I would, surpass that. And then just had an upward trajectory. But, what's interesting, Darius, I will tell you, because what intersected there was life of getting engaged and getting married. So launched the enterprise early 1995, was engaged to my wonderful wife, Lynn, and she then, we were going to get married October 7th, 95. I had student loan debt still I was paying off, had some savings, but ran a little bit short of money before we were even married. And my wife, Lynn, goes, I got you covered.
Wow.
I got you covered. So when I look back at my journey, Darius, it goes back to my wife having belief in our future and me as an entrepreneur, and literally was my venture capital, private equity, and going, hey, honey, I got some student loans. I've got some bills. I know we're not married yet. And are you willing to, support us? And she did. And it comes full circle, Darius, because my wife MBA, had worked in large corporate America, Procter and Gamble, General Motors. She then left corporate America in the 2011-12 to come back and join Lumen Legal. She had financed us, operated. Then she said, let's join forces because together we can really scale the enterprise. And by that time, I knew the difference between visionary and integrator. I was the pure visionary. She was an incredible integrator. And then coming together to run the enterprise in the last 9 years unlocked tremendous value for us in our enterprise. And that's something that I think is the greatest entrepreneurial lesson we learned, was just the ability to bring our unique abilities together to take an enterprise that was successful, doing really well, but then to the next level that allowed us to exit in 2020. So interesting journey over those 27 years.
Yeah, it's just so much there. Like, first of all, I think the first thing that popped in my head, there's a couple, was like how important it is when you're picking our partners, right? Especially as entrepreneurs. I actually think it makes or breaks you as an entrepreneur in a lot of ways. Yeah. And like you just gave a good example of it helping make you as an entrepreneur. Yeah. I had a scenario. My first business, I actually got, the reason I know you through, because I did BOG, was for my first company, Twin Capital, and that company imploded in 2009. Yep. Imploded is probably the wrong word. Yep. I turned it off because I was like, oh, this thing is not going to make it. Wound it down and moved the business to another business. But so anyway, in the process of doing that, the reason I made that decision was because I think I made that decision at the end of 2009. Dude, at that point, I was 2.5 years into not making any money from a business that was at 10 million in revenue in 2006, right? Yep. And so, tracking for 10 million. And so, in 2007. And so, but from that point, I didn't start making money till the end of 2010. Beginning of 2000, and even 2011 and 10 were like not that great of years. These were like I didn't know if I was going to make money those years. So I would say like I had 5 years where I didn't make money. But my wife was working then, and we were married. Like I got married in 2007, so we were like newly married. We'd been together for 6 years prior to that. But yeah, she was making, I don't know, she was making enough money where it covered our bills. Yes. And it made it where, I mean, I had savings and stuff like that, so I could have lived off that. But as an entrepreneur, like going into your savings for years on end, that doesn't work. Like that freaks you out, right? So like, to your point, man, like you chose well. What happened? How big was the business in 12 when she joined you guys? Like how many employees? What was, like, whatever you're willing to share.
Yeah. So probably between that time and when we exited, we doubled in size, right? Just because she was able to bring a scenario. So I'll kind of rewind a little bit to give you the story leading up to when she joined, right? So if you think about it, you brought up 2008, 2009, right? The Great Recession, right? So just rewinding back, fast growth in the early 2000s. Inc. 500, 2 years in a row. Quick lesson learned, right? We were growing so fast, almost outstripped our cash, right? So I always love sharing these lessons, right? Almost torpedoed the company back then because it was all about grow as fast as I could, right? Not really having the infrastructure in place, not turning cash quick enough. So that was lesson number one I learned entrepreneurial at that time, was there's a certain level of growth, right? If you don't have systems and structures in place, and I didn't, I almost imploded my own company by growing revenue and just focused on that. So that was an incredible lesson for me as an entrepreneur because, Inc. 500, that's my goal. I want to do it. Yeah, that's awesome. But there's risk there, right? So I was like sharing that lesson there. And then when we get up to 2008, 2009, right? Our industry, legal staffing at that point, went down 40%. Wow. In that timeline, right? And so all of a sudden you're sitting there, we were happy. Our business only went down 33%. Wow. We're like, we're doing amazing. Better than the market, right? Yeah. But when you think about it, right? External forces then. So I bring those two instances up, Darius. internal forces, fast growth, a lot of risk. External forces, then you're like, what do we do? And in that moment, 08, 09, global chairperson, as you had mentioned, right? Traveling the world, seeing stuff imploding, Lehman Brothers, seeing all this happening. And meanwhile, our business is like, whoa, this is interesting, right? During that phase of being chairperson and everything that we were seeing, we ended up having two companies, General Motors and Chrysler, which were large clients, go bankrupt. Go bankrupt.
Wow.
And we, as a staffing company, would pay the wages of our temporary attorneys at the time ahead of time. Chrysler and GM would pay us 90 to 120 days.
Oh, wow.
When they go bankrupt, all of those invoices go away, and we've already paid all those wages.
Wow.
So in that moment, Darius, we came within $20,000 approximately of literally losing everything.
Wow. So did they not pay those invoices at all?
No, because they went. And so, it's an interesting thing. We ended up, moving through that, had to make some significant internal cuts, all the things we did to move through it. And then we had a great year in 2011. Lynn joined us, had some big projects that allowed us to move out of that. But it's an amazing, amazing change, right? And lesson there, risk lesson that we learned was there's something called accounts receivable insurance that people may know of, where you can insure your accounts receivable, that if someone does go bankrupt, 90 cents on the dollar, you get paid.
Wow.
We didn't have that at that point.
Yeah, it's interesting.
We went bare because we thought it's General Motors, it's Chrysler. We got blue chip customers. They're never going to go bankrupt. We're good.
Right. Yeah. But it goes to show you, it's like, to your point, the insurance probably would have been way cheaper, right? Yeah. Because they're blue chip customers, AAA bonds, and so which is how people think of those companies.
Yes.
So yeah, that's pretty interesting. See, my business, we were subprime lender. Yes. And when the credit market seized in August of 2007, we ended up turning off our whole pipeline. I'm like, I'm not funding any of these loans. It's for a different reason. But like, I made that decision because I didn't want to, because there's some potential downstream effects that if the people buying our loans wouldn't buy them, which they were starting to not do, we would essentially I would blow up. I would have to I'd owe the banks $30 million. So I was 20, I was 29 then. I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. And they're all personally guaranteed and stuff. So I was like, yeah, that's not happening. So same thing happened though. Our revenue dropped by 90%, 85, 90%, like instantly. It was like instant. Like imagine you built a pipeline that's supposed to create all your revenue, and 1 weekend of the month you're like, nope, I'm not going to sell any of that.
Yeah.
So my overhead then was $1 million a month for my business, and I was bringing in $150,000 of revenue. So and what I also learned, it's funny what you just said was you learned a lesson. I learned a lesson, which is your business always pays its expenses in arrears. So so you accrue expenses, and then your new revenue covers your old expenses, and that's just kind of how it goes. And so even though August was when we got hit, I still had I could turn off my expenses very quickly, which I did. It was brutal. It was like as brutal as could be, like laying off like 90% of my staff like overnight. But my expenses were from June, July, where I had that $1 million a month of expenses. So I didn't know if we were going to go to zero. I was just like, I have no idea. I was at the Inc. 5000 conference in September of 2007, and I joked I was the 40th fastest growing company in the US then. I said I'm probably the 40th fastest shrinking company in the United States right now.
Right.
But yeah, we ended up we got down to like 200 grand from a couple $1 million in the bank within like 90 days, and just by chance lived,
Yeah.
So
and that shows the difference, right? The highs, lows, entrepreneurship is not linear, right? And so that's why I love sharing these stories with entrepreneurs like you as well, because we live those same journeys, right? And then your podcast listeners thinking, man, it's never linear, man. It's up,
No.
down, round here. And how do we navigate through those amazing challenges, right? So then if you start to move through that process, right, Lynn joins our organization. And then, in 2013, I remember the date, and people will probably be like, man, Galbenski's crazy. You remember specific dates, but you remember specific moments. October 21st, 2013, my life changed again. One day after I ran the Detroit Free Press Marathon, I was in Henry Ford Health getting a procedure to figure out why over the last couple years, my liver numbers were a little bit wonky. On that day, I was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disease called primary sclerosing cholangitis, otherwise known as PSC, rare autoimmune disease that attacks your liver. And there's no treatment other than when you enter end-stage liver disease, you get on a list that you can get a transplant. No drugs, no other things that really can stave off this. And it progresses sometimes months, years, or decades before it gets to end-stage liver disease. So how precise is that for putting together a plan? We don't know, Dave, when you're going to enter end-stage liver disease. Could be months, it could be years, it could be decades. And so at that moment, our life took a major change. I was in my early 40s. Our daughter was a teenager. Lynn had just, last couple of years joined the organization. And we had one decision. Were we going to live with an abundance mindset or a scarcity mindset? And we chose abundance. We're like, we're going to fight through this, but we're going to live our lives understanding the facts that we're facing. But we're just going to keep enjoying being family, keep enjoying running the business, and see where it goes. So those moments, right? Again, we talked about some of the business challenges. Then as entrepreneurs, what do we face? Sometimes external challenges that hit you that are around health, around other family issues that crop up. And then what mentality are we going to bring to it? For us, it was abundance versus scarcity.
And what do you think, like, was it explicit that you guys made that decision, or where you said, hey, actually those words came out of your mouth between you and your wife? So that's my first question. And secondly, what are some ways you did that, like, despite, the complications of the disease?
Yeah. So I'll answer it in the way that EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization, the forum, gave me great clarity going into that 2013. So we did an exercise that was all about, what's our life purpose, and I came up with an acronym that really then helped me get to that mindset. So my purpose in life that I discovered there right before I was diagnosed was that I'm here to listen, learn, lead, love, connect, and inspire, to be. Right? So L4CI2B, right? And so for me, when we hit that, I go, okay, I'm here to do those things. So what does that mean? I got to figure out how I'm going to live my life honoring what that purpose is, right? So in terms of then using the exact abundance versus scarcity, I don't know if we nailed it to those two words. I did in retrospect, but that's how we chose to live when we just said, we're not changing pathways. We're going to go give this everything we got, and we're just going to enjoy every moment that we can with each other personally and with scaling our enterprise. And then as facts become more known, we're going to process them, but we're just going to honor what we're doing. So for me, it was being clear on what my purpose was listen, learn, lead, love, connect, and inspire, and just be in the moment. So once I had that clarity, I go, external force hit me. How do I go about doing it, right? And so that was how we then, that's how we lived our life. And then it progressed to end stage liver disease over a 6-year period. So from 2013 to 2019, when I got listed on the transplant list. And so for me, that was the journey. And, at that point, we were growing our business significantly, raising our daughter. And I was having, health challenges that we just, we kept quiet to ourselves. And certainly our family and close friends knew, but it wasn't something that we took public at that point.
Yeah. So interesting. Like I had kind of an epiphany 2 years ago, and it was after a lot of like turmoil, that kind of self-inflicted turmoil in my own life, and a lot of it the audience has heard me talk about, just as far as leaving my business and kind of having this like midlife crisis essentially. But the realization I had was that I was always like kind of beating myself up on these like external goals I was not hitting. Sure. And then and then the full circle on that was that I came to the conclusion that the goal is not that. The goal is to like live who I am. Right. And I got really explicit about like what that looked like as far as creating impact, building relationships, and being healthy, and like and I just said I'm just gonna like focus on that stuff because and do it with like in earnest, as opposed to like build a $1 billion company, which like whatever that means, right? Like that's something that you don't necessarily control. You control parts of it, but not all of it. And then get mad when it doesn't happen. Which is how I'd lived the previous 40 plus years of my life. And so what I heard you say was like, I just got really clear on how I wanted to show up, and like, let the cards fall where they may, which is the conclude. I'm like, the minute I think you realize that, then life gets way easier. Like, how do you react?
Right. It became an incredible filter for me, Darius. Right.
Yeah.
Then I go, how am I showing up? And am I listening? Am I learning? Am I loving it? Right. I mean, am I leading? And that's all I needed to do was go, how can I be in the present moment?
Right.
And what it also unleashed for me, right? And to your point about, building, your dream $1 billion company, what does it look like? That oftentimes is a legacy that you're looking to leave in whatever way, impacting your industry, for future generations, for philanthropy. What I decided with that is I'm like, okay, all I can control is how I show up in the moment.
Right.
And then I tied it to legacy, and I go, legacy is a loaded word. It's a challenge. What does it mean to people? And I go, legacy really is the cumulative impact of my everyday moments that I was present. And I don't define what my legacy is. It's defined by other people. So I really have no control over that. Even if I'm like, I'm going to put my name up on a building and whatever. Yeah. It doesn't matter. It's the legacy that other people think. And I go, well, that's interesting, because they're going to have whatever impression they have of me on how I show up. So all I got to do is listen, learn, lead, love. And hopefully by doing that, by living, I connect and inspire others to be the best versions of themselves. And it took a lot of pressure off of legacy. It was just like, just be you.
Yeah.
And keep working on it, right? I don't have it solved. I don't do it perfectly, but it's a great filter for those moments, Darius, to go, I'm going to be as present as I can and let the future unfold.
Yeah, I love that. And it doubles down on what, because I think that there's this, like, to your point, I think legacy is misinterpreted, right? Of like, how will people, like, remember my achievements? And like, I'm going to say something that you might laugh at, which is I'm like, no one gives a fuck about your achievements but you. No. like nobody. Like, there's not like here, let's play a game. Name one person whose achievements, David, that you give a shit about besides your own family and yours.
No one.
Zero, I can't even think of one.
No one.
Like, I can think of maybe 2 names of people whose achievements are like so big that I can like that I'm like aware of. Like, yeah, Elon Musk had a big achievement. Steve Jobs did. That's cool. Do I care that they had big achievements? Only as much as it benefits me. So it's like nobody cares, right? But like, to your point, the exponential factor comes into play of like, hey, how did I interact with people to then
Yes.
make their lives better, to then make them better so that they can interact with people to make their people around them better? I'm like, that's the juice right there. So I love that you said that, man.
Well, it is. And, you know, I look back on this journey that I've had with, you know, diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, getting on the transplant list, and then actually getting a transplant. So I was lucky enough, Darius, that there's two organs in our human body that can be donated when you're alive. So you have two kidneys, you only need one to live. So you can donate while you're alive a kidney to someone else to save a life. And on the liver side, you only have one liver, but your liver regenerates in both the donor and the recipient. So I was lucky in that I went on the transplant list in February, and in November, my brother-in-law, Mark, so my wife, Lynn's younger sister's husband, right? And so not a blood relation, but saved my life. He stepped forward and said, Dave, I'm going to be a living donor, you know, and it saved my life, right? And when we go back to life, when you look back, I go, wow, a choice of a spouse, Lynn, 30 years ago, her younger sister, how would I ever know her younger sister, Karen, would marry Mark and would become my living donor, right? I mean, it's just unfathomable how life unfolds. And when I think about that, I go, the greatest gift I was given was literally the diagnosis and the journey that we've went on, because it really allowed me to get clear on life and what mattered most. And then when that transpired, to feel the incredible love of someone that was willing to save my life, right? And there's two things that really stick out to me. One is the power of vulnerability. We had to be very vulnerable, Lynn and I, saying, Dave's going to die. If he doesn't get a deceased organ, could someone step forward and maybe become a living donor, right? And that is the mindset of, I got to be vulnerable, but boy, am I worthy? Am I worthy of someone's love that they're willing to do that, right? And that was an interesting process to go through. But then when you got to the other side of it, the incredible connection that I feel to Mark and other living donors is something I can't even describe, right? It's just this bond of, you know, this surreal connection that goes, wow, he loved me enough to save my life. And boy, what a hero, what an angel on earth. And all I can do going forward is try to pay it forward. And that was then the genesis of the Living Liver Foundation, was to live my life that's really a second chance at life that I'm almost 5 years into, to pay it forward in honor of Mark and all the tens of thousands other heroes that make that same decision to save someone else's life.
What so talk a little bit about the you know, I know you guys have Living Liver Foundation. I had an experience probably right around the time that you got diagnosed. You got diagnosed in 13, you said?
Yeah.
Mine was in 12, where my August of 12, prior to that probably even, and I'm going to spare this person embarrassment, but a person that I knew very well, his father had like cirrhosis of the liver.
Sure.
Neither of the sons would donate the livers. Neither.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, this is fucked up.
Yes.
You know, like in looking back, I was like, neither of them would step up and do it. One of them had a history of drug use, which I think was the reason he couldn't. The other one just like straight up just didn't want to. Like just and the risk, you know, it was funny when I heard it, I was like, whoa, like that's jacked up.
Yes.
And that person was like very close to my family, and my family was like, stop talking to him. They're like, they just thought it was so not okay. His father passed away, died.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
So I mean, obviously it's a personal choice, and I don't want to shame him. I mean, that he felt unsafe to do it,
Sure.
and you could call him selfish or whatever. But I kind of felt like there was like a lack of understanding of the risk. I mean, obviously there's risk with doing any surgery, but what is the risk of being a living donor? Because as you say it, I'm like, man, it seems like so honorable to save, to give someone a piece of your liver that regenerates back to full force. And then and a part of me is like, man, I want to do that. And the other part of me is like, but what if it goes sideways and I die from it, right? Or like,
Yeah.
like I don't want that to happen. So like I'm sure a lot of people feel that way. What like educate us a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll kind of just walk you quickly through the process of how someone becomes a living donor. And then there are risks, right? It's a surgery. So what I always tell people is flat out, yes, are risks, just like anything. An elective surgery, you go in, things can go wrong up to and including death, right? But here's the safeguards to minimize that risk, right? Can never eliminate it, right? It's still there. The safeguards are when someone wants to become a living donor, they go register with the healthcare center that I'm listed at. In my case, it was in Detroit, Henry Ford Health. So Mark says, hey, I want to help Dave, goes into a portal, registers at Henry Ford Health as a potential living donor, puts in his blood type, and then they move him through, if he's chosen, a very in-depth screening process, medical and psychological. So he's going through an incredible battery of tests to ensure that he is healthy enough to go through that surgery and recover. The second thing is once you pass that hurdle, both medically and psychologically, every decision that is made in the donor process is made in the favor of the donor, meaning they will not put any undue risk on. So in most cases, by giving a liver, the recipient usually gets 65%, and the donor keeps 35%. For me, as we went through the process, the day of the surgery, they decided the best interest of Mark was to reverse those percentages so that he was going to be safe, have enough liver to go, and the risk would fall to me that I got 35%. He kept 65% because they felt I was strong enough to be able to come through. There was enough volume mass that it would both regenerate. So when we think about that risk, the system does everything it can to minimize that risk. It's still there. But that's how people square it up. They go, I'm going to save a life. It's a very small percentage. And I know that I've gone through everything medically, psychologically, and with a support system to make it happen.
I love that, man. And it's good to hear because I was like, oh, I'm curious about that. And now, and I know we're getting tight here on the end as far as the end of the show, unfortunately. But like, what's like the things folks should know if they want to get involved with this? How many lives are they saving? Like how many people are not getting this, and what can people do to help?
100%. So I'll tell you our goal, Darius, zero wait list. Today in the United States, there are 100,000 people, 90,000 waiting for a kidney from a deceased organ donor, 10,000 from waiting on a liver. 17 people a day die waiting for a deceased organ. So what we're trying to do as a foundation is make people aware and educate them on that they can save a life. Statistics are really cool. In the United States, if we look at donor age between 20 and 60, which is kind of your core donor age, if 0.06% of people in that donor age said, I'm going to be a living donor, it would move that wait list down to 0.
Wow.
So it's achievable because we're not chasing a cure, Darius. It can happen today. Our bodies are designed to allow us to donate those 2 organs. I'm a faith-based guy. I believe in God. He designed our bodies that way to allow us to give to someone else and save their lives. So we can step forward and solve that today. The medical technology is there. The surgery is getting easier and easier with robotics and the like. The recovery time shrinking. So we're going to do it in my lifetime. We're going to get to wait list 0. And I'm going to share with you one cool piece of data that will be coming out in the next couple months from an organization that you're aware of called kindness.org.
Oh, yeah.
.org. Jacqueline Lindsay, amazing CEO, has done some incredible research on kindness acts. And here's what it is. They did this incredible study, academic study, blows my mind. 40,000 participants rating 1,692 kind acts. That's a lot of acts. The number one overall kind act, giving an organ to a friend. Number one overall kind act. So later this year, there'll be a fun week that'll be around Kindness Week. And we're going to really be publicizing the ability to do that kind act and save lives so that in the next decade or so, no one in the United States and maybe around the world will have to die waiting for a deceased organ. So just be aware of it, be in the news. And when that calling hits you as a potential living donor, don't fight that urge, explore it. And if it's the right thing for you, it'll happen. If it's not, you've at least recognized that there was a calling in you to explore it further. And then just tell stories of these heroes that are making a difference. Those two things can get us to waitlist zero. Darius, I know we're coming up on the end, man. I can't thank you enough, brother, for your friendship, for your incredible energy, and for you sharing your incredible network by bringing people on to share their stories and you sharing your stories along the way. It's inspirational, motivational, and it's your great service to the world, man. So thank you.
I appreciate you, brother. Well, before we go, we're going to get to the greatness question. We're going to have to, if you mind if we run over by a minute or two? Does that work?
Can do.
Yeah, so we're going to get to the greatness question. But for folks that want to learn more about the Living Liver Foundation or anything else that you think that would make sense, just take a second, promote how they can connect with you, how they can learn more about the foundation or anything else you think is important.
Yeah, I'll make it real easy. Go to livingliver.org. Shoot me an email there, learn about living organ donation. You'll see a ton of the stuff we've done there around living donor awareness games. Check it out. Happy to fill people in on it if they look to learn more.
Fantastic. So are you ready for a greatness question, David?
I'm ready. Bring it on, brother.
Let's do it. All right. So what is the number one barrier to creating greatness that you've overcome in your life, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah. For me, greatness is all about having the right mindset. And I think for me over my life, it's constantly working on the way that we're wired to think negatively, to be more emotional. And the greatest thing I've worked on that I think can unleash greatness is how do we change our mindset? We're going to feel those negative emotions. We're going to have to work through those processes. But how can I build that mental muscle to still move through those human emotions and stages quicker, faster, so that I still feel them, but it allows me to turn back to what I really need to be focused in on. So that is what I've learned over time. Mindset, building the muscle to take what is natural to us, to focus on negative, to focus on emotions, move through those as quick as possible so I can get back to being the best version of myself and contributing whatever I'm supposed to contribute to this world while I have a continued breath in this world.
David Galbenski, man, I appreciate you, brother. I love you. And I'm so excited for all the greatness you have and will continue to bring to the world. Thank you for coming on the show today, my friend.
You're awesome, brother. Love back at you, man.
All right. You guys share this. People need to know about it. This living donor thing is a big deal. And really an honor to have David here. Till next time, peace out, everybody. We love you. You are listening to The Greatness Machine, and that's a wrap for today. Listen, if you love what you heard, subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform that you're tuning in on so that you don't miss any of our future episodes. We have tons of great people coming on, and we're stoked to have you here to enjoy it with us. Leave us a review. Tell us what you love most about this particular episode. We love getting the reviews. We love to see what you guys love most. And if this particular episode, made you think of someone who's leveling up in their business and in their life, print screen, share it with them. Leaders are the best givers. And after all, we're all here to support and grow with each other. And in case you want to see some of the fun behind the scenes shots or some of the things that we're doing, I'm actually writing about this in my weekly newsletter. Go to www.therealdarius.com and subscribe to my newsletter. We're talking about fun things like business and life and mindfulness and cryptocurrencies and gosh, I don't even know, everything and anything, but it's tons of fun stuff I write about. I try to get it out on a weekly basis. You can subscribe at www.therealdarius.com. And with that said, look, thank you guys so much Appreciate you. I love you. Peace. We're out of here. See you guys on the next one.
She's my lover.